Yeah, battle scenes are actually very hard to write. I've, of course, done quite a few of them in the Song of Ice and Fire books. Very different from Marco's battles, of course. He's dealing with warfare on other planets and space with high tech weaponry and missiles and bombs and projectiles of various sorts, and I'm dealing with big hairy guys with axes and swords, wearing metal and trying to stick each other with spears or firing arrows. But some of the basic challenges are still the same, no matter the level of technology or weaponry. I've read a lot of military history. I've always been fascinated by that, and it kind of frustrated by the way battles are often done in, say, television and film in particular. The challenge is to try to get both aspects of the battle, the general's eye and the private's eye. The general's eye, the general's sitting back in the battle and he's seeing the front and he's seeing, okay, my left flank is getting pushed back and I better send in my reserve there and let me swing the cavalry around here and here's some important high ground I better add here. So he's seeing all the tactical and strategic aspects of the battle and he's playing it out like a chess game. And that's fascinating for someone who likes military history and the aspects of warfare that are covered by that. But it can tend to be dry. Now, the private's eye view is much more visceral. It's, here I am standing on the battle, and oh my God, this big guy is coming at me with an axe. I better get my shield up. Oh my God, he hit me. Well, wait a minute, I stand him in the belly. Now his guts are falling out. It's much more visceral. It's much more exciting, but you don't have any sense of the bigger battle. So the real challenge of writing a good battle scene is to try to capture both of those in the scene, to try to give the reader a sense of the tactics of the battle and what's happening on the larger battlefront, while still putting you in the eyes and ears of your protagonist and kind of putting your reader right in the middle of the action, which is what's going to get the blood pumping and the excitement going.
Next subject, war and violence. Of course, there is a lot of violence in a book, especially in A Song of Ice and Fire, but you treated it very seriously. It's never for fun. Is there a relationship with your life during the Vietnam War? The way you treat violence and war?
Well, war has been a central part of fantasy since Tolkien and even before. I mean, you can literally go back to the Iliad, and you've got a fantasy classic set around the Trojan War. So I think it's certainly a legitimate subject to write about. But I do think it is a subject that's of great importance, maybe the most important thing of all. And it should not be treated, for fun. Because it's not, to me at least, it's not funny. Yeah, you can get humor out of everything. Let me rephrase that. You can do funny things about war, sure. People have done and will do, and you can find black humor in anything, and that's good too. I appreciate black humor. But for me, I worked in network television for American network television for 10 years back in the 80s and 90s. And being a broadcast station, we were subject to network standards and practices, that is censorship. And they tried to keep out all sex was one of the things. And the other thing is they always tried to tone down the violence. In fact, they probably would have said, well, we don't want any violence in our show. But we do want lots of action. And action what is action? The network might give you a different definition, but to my mind, action is bloodless violence. You see action, an action film, here's an exciting car chase and all the cars are slamming against each other and they're flipping over and they're going into the ditch and the flames are engulfing the cars that have crashed. You never actually see the twisted bodies. You never see the person who, when the car slammed into each other, their leg was severed and they're bleeding to death in the front of that car. You never see the drivers inside the car that's just blown up, screaming in agony as the flesh consumes them. That's the side of action the network doesn't want to show you because it might disturb you. Well, sorry, I think you should be disturbed. It's, my position on this is really kind of articulated over the last decades since I did this, and I'm against action. I mean, you can do a straight character piece with no deaths in it and no one being in jeopardy and all that, and that's fine. You can write My Dinner with Andre or a Woody Allen comedy and all that. But if you're going to do something where people are dying, if you're going to do a war story especially, then show war the way it is. And the way it is complicated. Because the truth is, we like war. Why is there this aptitude for action? Because like Achilles, who had the choice between a short and glorious life or a long and boring one, he chose the short and glorious life, and he wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, and indeed he did. The ancients always talked about the glories of war, and you can still see some of that in the pageantry of the Middle Ages, which I reflect in Game of Thrones, in the knights with their armor shining in the sun, the banners, in a world that was largely brown and mud-colored. Here were these incredible warriors with their heraldry, with their eagles and their lions and their wolves flying from the banners. It has a beauty to it, a frightening beauty. But when those armies clash, then you get the severed limbs and you get the lakes of blood and you get all of that. And I think if you're going to honestly treat with that material, show both sides. And that's what I try to do. Show the glory, but also show the pain and the grief and the cost of the glory, the price of war. I'm not a pacifist, but I was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. Because I thought that particular war was immoral and illegal. In fact, as most wars by America have been illegal over the last, well, pretty much my lifetime. They would always ask you when you applied, but you had to have an interview and you had to answer questions when you applied for conscientious objector status. And there were some draft boards in the United States that only wanted to grant it to total pacifists, people who at least would claim, well, I would never fight under any circumstances, I would never take a human life. I certainly don't claim that for myself. I never have taken a human life, but I think under the right circumstances I could. And they always say, well, what would you do if, Adolf Hitler was raping your grandmother? Well, yeah, I would kill Adolf Hitler if he was raping my grandmother. I might kill him just for being Adolf Hitler. But, it was always, well, would you fight in World War II? Yeah, most of us would fight in World War II. But World War II wasn't the war on the menu at the present time. And one of the things I decided then, grappling with these issues, was that Ho Chi Minh was not Adolf Hitler. And in fact, he was certainly not Sauron, which is the issue that much of us have to deal with as fantasy writers. It's all very easy to always write these books in which Sauron is always the villain, or Morgoth even worse, or and you're fighting against the Dark Lord, or the Rotten One, or the bad guy, or Lord Malice, or whatever the hell you're going to call your big bad. But real life doesn't really offer us that, and I wanted to inject a certain level of realism into the kind of fiction I was writing.
Thank you very much.